Sometimes how process on Sunday morning just kind of unfolds. My lessons today is how does God talk to you? And so the thought of God is right there. So, and also there's a couple stories about some poems in here. So thank you for sharing your beautiful poem today. So how does God talk to us? Well, I've been listening to this advertisement on TV. And it goes something like this. Life is full of special moments. Sometimes we look forward to them, and sometimes we don't. This advertisement's been rolling around in my head for a week. I'd like to get rid of it. Now, as a marketing major, I'm interested in how advertisement affects our lives. And I enjoy watching the advertisement. It drives my wife crazy. She moved from the front row to the back row, so I don't know. Maybe I drove her too crazy this week in watching too many advertisements. But I look forward to trying to figure out, what are they selling? How are they selling? What's their market target? What's their audience? What's their age group? And what's the end results? Does it bring joy and happiness or an unusable product? Or are they just trying to sell more pills to us old folks? A couple weeks back, I was following this truck, and they were going up the road, and I read on the back of the bumper, and I maybe said this to you. On the left-hand side, it said WZ. In the middle, it said U. And on the right, it said G. Wise up, George. Wise up, God. Well, I passed the truck, and there was nothing on the side, so what is the message here? What is somebody trying to tell me? Now, after watching that and listening to this advertisements, sometimes we look forward and other times we don't. And seeing that bumper sticker, I begin to ask the question, how does God talk to us? Well, before anybody pulls out their phones, I do talk to God, and anybody starts calling the little people in the white jackets, the men and women, and saying, he's crazy, he's gone off the edge. But it's not. They're not coming to take me away, haha. So let me explain how life works for me. So let's start with the Bible. There have been many people in the Bible that have talked to God. And we learned a couple weeks back from Ken's class, one of the most famous people was Abram. And Abraham was told to go from the location he was living in into Canaan. And in the process of doing so, we find out later in history from Canaan, where he moved to, that Judaism, Christianity, and Muslims, that was their founding roots, from one location, from one place. So that God telling Abram, it was the start of many things in the world. Now, Moses spoke to God on Mount Sinai, and that's where he got the covenant of code, or sometimes we call it the Ten Commandments. And we're expressed that in the Bible from Exodus 33:11. And when Moses got to the top, he heard this voice and said, "Hey, Moses." He looked around. All he saw was a bush. "Hey, Moses, who do you say I am?" Now, Moses begins to get a little wiser and say, something's up here. And he says, "I say, you are who I am." And so God says, "Moses, come over here and grab this rock. I want you to chisel out some code I want you to take down to those people." So he hammers away and puts up 12 different codes. I'm done. So he starts down. Now, Moses, not being the athletic type, falls down about halfway down and breaks a piece of the rock off. Well, when he gets up and dusts himself off, and he looks to see that 2 of the codes have fallen off. And that's where we get the 10 Commandments, not 12. Just saying. Now, many other people spoke to God. Mary, she spoke through an angel. The angel told Mary that she would have a son, who she would name as Jesus. He would be great, and he would be the Son of the Most High. Now, Joseph also spoke to God through a dream and about the birth of Jesus. Angel told Joseph to marry. Now, wait a second. I didn't do anything, Joseph said. Wait a second. I'm betrothed, but, I didn't cause any problems here. But the angel said, you will have a special baby that is born, and you will also name it Joseph, just like he had told Mary. Now the shepherds were also talked to God. He spoke to them from the angels on high. One of the shepherds, after hearing the beautiful song, said, hey, Tom, grab that baby sheep. Let's go to town. There's a party. So they did, and they got to meet Jesus. Now the Magi also spoke through dreams about the birth of Jesus. Well, but one of the most famous is John the Baptist. John the Baptist heard God's voice and saw the heavens open up after Jesus had been baptized in the Jordan River. And John would lose his head over this thought, but that's another story. God spoke to a large amount of people in scriptures over the years and over the centuries. It's important to remember the God of the scriptures is the same then is the same God we have now. God has not changed. We have moved. Sometimes when we hear people start saying, I talk to God, we think they are frauds or liars even. Well, that's not the case. It's still the same God. We hear them in different ways. God does command us daily to do different things. Some of them come serendipitously. Some of us come by a spiritual 2-4 to the head. And some of it's just by imaging. Now, I was talking to Patrick last week, and we were talking about this very subject. And so he gave me one of his favorite poems from the Course in Miracles. So from the Course in Miracles, choose once again if you would like to take your place among the saviors of the world, or remain in hell and hold your brother there. For he has come and he has asked this. And so the Course in Miracles goes on to explain that statement. How do you make choices? How easy is this to explain? You always choose between your weakness and the strength of the Christ in you. And what you choose is what you think is real. Simply by never using weakness to direct your action, you have given it power. And the light of the Christ in you gives charge of everything you do. For you have brought your weakness unto him, and he has given you this strength instead. Now, I derive the message there that we're always choosing. And the Spirit of God is always there helping us with those choices. Looking back, I can remember years ago, I was sitting in my bedroom trying to decide if I was going to go to ministerial school or I was going to keep the job I had at that particular point in time. It was a long night in the silence. The stars shone brightly, but I sat and listened. And eventually, the Spirit came to me and said, it's your choice. Well, I chose the job. All worked out in the end. I got a very nice pension, and now I can come to church here, and I'm financially sound to be able to do the things I like to do, teach, and be a part of unity. And so my ministry is for learning and hopefully sharing some bits of what works for me in my life. So that was the answer for that prayers that night. Now, sometimes we see things that image us, that show us what God's message is trying to do. Most of you know I love to fly fish. And so I was up in Montana in Wyoming on the Rawlins River. It was flowing out of the Rawlins Dam. So I'm standing in water about waist deep, casting my line out. And up to the stream walks this little brown bear. And he just lays there and kind of plays around in the mud. And he quietly by himself there. And I thought, he's not by himself. Mama's close at hand. And as I continue to fish, up the river walks a big bull moose. He's got a herd of about 4 cows. He's pushing them upstream to the next green space. And as I watch them go by, I hear this squealing sound overhead. It's an eagle, a brown eagle, not a golden eagle, or a golden eagle, not a bald eagle. And as he squawks, I watch him fly overhead, and he takes a dive, and he must have been going 30, 40 miles an hour. I thought he was going to hit the water and crash. At the last minute, his tannins came out, and he caught the fish my fish, right at the edge of this river. And just as he finished going by, there was a pelican. A pelican flew in. Now, pelicans aren't normally in Wyoming. So what do all these images are about? Well, most of these images we can find in our 12 powers. Little brown bear represents understanding, the ability to know and perceive that his mother is close at hand. He's safe, even though he's there with humans. I never did see her, but later on, when I got to move in his direction, he scampered and ran up the hill. I heard a lot of noise in the bushes. So Mama Bear was at hand. The moose represents judgment with the ability to master and control. Here's a wise old moose knew it was time to move his cows to a safer spot. Maybe he heard Mama Bear, I don't know. But here was this big moose, all in control, making sure that his cows were safe. And the eagle, he represents faith with confidence and convictions. The lilies and the birds are the teachers of faith. They do not complain about the circumstances of their birth. Instead, they accept everything as God's will. They will blossom and flourish as best they can, given whatever situation they find themselves in. He knew that food would be there, and so he would be taken care of, even though it was my fish. The pelican represents order. He was out of place. He had flown in from Salt Lake City several hundred miles away to the dam at Rollins. And I know that even when we are out of place, the domain of who we are, of what we're about, order, will always make us safe. Now, in the book, The Progressive Movement, I have a story in there, and I'd like to share you a quick synopsis of one of the stories that's in there to talk about serendipitous, how that affects our lives, and sometimes we don't even know it. I was living and working at El Paso, Texas, driving a big red cargo van. And I was drinking a lot, and so one day I talked to a person and said, "You need to go to Unity. That's the church for AA." Okay, yeah, right. So I got in my big van, late getting out the door, and I got to an intersection, and my van stopped. It stopped dead still. So I thought, this is strange. This van's only a year old. So I turned it back on, and it started. And so as I put it in gear and started to move forward, it turned to the right. That's even stranger. So I thought to myself, I'm never going to get to this Unity thing. It's never going to happen. So as I started to move forward, I turned to the right a little further, and right across the corner from me was Unity Church. So I said to myself, it's after 11. I'm never going to get a place to park. So as I pulled forward, it pulled to the right, and right in front of me was a big parking spot big enough for my big red van. Well, still not believing, I got out and started inside and said, I'll never find a seat. I walked in the door, and this gentleman sitting in the very back row tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I've been waiting for you. Please come in and sit down." Well, luckily enough, he was the usher for the day. He was looking for help. But I moved from the back pew to the front pew bench, and Charles, who was that usher, and I became very good friends over the years. So it was a blessing to be there. But I can remember we talked about impatience and anxiety and frustration. That happens to me more frequently than I would like. And last week I was rushing to go someplace, and I stepped out to my car, and I was feeling just tied up in knots. And all of a sudden I looked up in the sky, and there's this angel. An angel. And it looked exactly like an angel you would perceive with wings and a halo and a long gown and stuff. I just took a deep breath, and at that moment, everything seemed to just flow away. The process of elimination is very important as one of our 12 steps. And as we let go, we deny those things that have power over us, That's why we use denials and affirmation here at Unity. We affirm the good that is coming and deny that it has any power over us. And at that particular moment, I know God was communicating to me just by that simple symbol in the sky. Well, before I could leave out the driveway, the angel was gone, and so was my anxiety. Now, everything begins with a thought. Sometimes that's hard to imagine, but it's true. Those things I will produce tomorrow will be in my thoughts today. For thoughts, ideas, beliefs, actions. Our old Unity saying, thoughts held to nine will produce after their kind. God or Spirit is in everywhere and in everything. Those two things fit very closely together as we work through life. I learned this very early in my Unity teachings. I had a friend that was a Baptist who believed God was out there on the cloud someplace with a long white beard and a long white flowing robe. Well, I too believed this as a child. Those are the stories I heard growing up. That he sat out there on this white cloud, and he had this book of records, and he was keeping track of me as a teenager, the good and the bad things I do. I think some days the bad outweighs the good, but it was not my book to keep. It was God's book, I believed. Well, she couldn't believe that I told her that God was everywhere and in everything, my Baptist friend. She couldn't believe that I was walking on God. I could sit on God. God was everywhere and in everything, the rocks, the bushes, the trees, even the wind. Well, we soon departed ways because conversations with God have changed over the centuries. We have now used modern technology. We no longer have to use burning bushes to communicate with gods or clouds or even images. There are many movies that have been made where people are speaking or having outright conversations with God. One of my favorite is Bruce Almighty. The Unity Church in El Paso made a video of George Almighty. I don't know if that was a hint or not. But Jim Carrey in this movie gets stuck with all these Post-it notes, and they're starting to stack up their prayers that he just can't keep up with. God's mighty power was able to answer all those prayers, but Bruce Almighty could not. Well, the lucky thing about it was Morgan Freeman was God's voice, and so he stepped in to help him. Another one is an interview with God. It's an upcoming young journalist, Faith, and challenges him when he finds himself interviewing a person that is said he is God. It's based on a true story. Another movie is Letters to God. It's a young boy's fight for cancer, against cancer. And he writes letters to God, and it touches the lives of his family, his friends. It changes the whole community and inspires others to help get involved in the fight against cancer. The Heart of a Man. It's the retelling of the parable of the prodigy son, interwoven with true testimonies. And one of my favorite is Oh God. They didn't like it once, they had to have it twice. So Oh God 1 and Oh God 2 with John Denver and George Burns. Remember George walking around as God smoking a stogie? It was a story about what is mine to do. And John fought that long and hard, John Denver. And George worked him through this stage of building up his confidence to tell people, I really do talk to God. He was able to share that with the world around him. Now, music and poems, our writings, are the conversations with God, or Spirit, whatever you'd like to give God his name. He and she comes in various, many, many names. I used to teach a class on poetry. Yes, I was a poet. I have a storage box full of over 1,000 poems. It's well organized. It's in the closet. It's labeled GIT. Anybody know what GIT stands for? It's my Get To project. Someday I'm going to get to it when I'm not doing other things. In this class, I taught how to get started in writing poems. I used a system called the hook, the hook, the hook. If you see something, hook it in your thoughts, bring it inside, let it roll around, make it into a poem. Now, most of the music we sing starts out as poems, or where the writer chooses a single subject or thought. The one I thought about last week is finding 3 pennies on the ground becomes things called life. Have you ever found 3 pennies on the floor? I bet we could make that into a song. The other one is Susan Riley, who produces and writes a lot of our songs here. We heard the words, "We are part of each other" on the Sunday service. And she wrote, "I Choose Love," which we sang last week. So we're inspired by so many things. One of my favorite, of course, is John Denver's song. And many of his songs are ballads. Ballads are a form of poetry that tell a story of emotion. They're usually typical 4 lines, simple rhythms, simple schemes. Most pop music is written in this form nowadays, and we refer to them as ballads. When I'm writing either a poem or a book, I get into this fixation, a zone. And I know at that particular moment, get out of the way, because my ego is stopping. Whatever is coming. I've heard many musicians say, "I'm in the zone." And that's when they produce most of their best works. I know that's what happens to me, and I can just almost let go of the pen. I'm writing so fast, I just can't keep up with the thoughts that are flowing through me. Our mission is believing love and peace is the gift. Life is all. Let me start that again. Our mission is believing love and peace is the gift living in all of us. As a companion, or in a group, or just as an individual, we may choose to serve as example of wisdom in the world. Not always easy, but also very important. I believe God reminds us of these simple things I've told you about this day. We learn from everyone that comes into our life, some by coming, some by going. On my journey in life, I have met one person who taught me how to connect to God at any one moment. She taught me how to meditate with my eyes open. So at any one given time, I can stand there in the silence and know what is mine to do. Change those anxieties to peaceful thoughts. One actual moment is, you're looking for page 6 and it's not there. We continue to have conversations with God every moment. Everything in our world has begun with a thought. Every thought is a prayer. I had to learn this. I always thought growing up prayers had to be formulated and fixed and just this way and no other way counts. Every thought's a prayer, because we're always talking to God, because God is everywhere and in everything. So I'm always trying to let go and let God. I listen for that conversation, and it comes to me in many forms: words, images, thoughts, or even in the music and the movies we play. The conversation is always ongoing, because I'm always reminded at one given moment or the next, God is everywhere and everything, even in my thoughts. It is important for me to listen. So I leave you with this poem. It is from Trish Harris. She's a yoga teacher, and the title is Divine Journey. May we remember our past with gratitude. May we live our presence with intention. May we take care of our future selves as best we can. And I would add, may we listen to the conversations we have with Spirit, for God is always showing us the way. Go and have a great week.